that just that just happened. Don't know why that happened. Should have kept going. Um, that's
Well,
so
that's
weird.
okay because we have the magic of buttons.
Yes, we have the magic of buttons. But hey, I'm going to do our logo real quick. We're just starting early tonight. So I was going to the private chat real quick, and when I clicked on the private chat, it took off the took it off the brand. So now I know. Apparently on my computer it does something. But
You're
anyway,
in like full old person mode tonight.
yeah. Well, I don't do. You remember now, I haven't as much practice and as everybody. I'm gonna just shoot the shit for another minute till we officially start. So, but I could actually, I'll just start.
I don't want to tell you anything, but the stream is running. I think
I know
you
it is
turned
running.
it
We're
on.
live.
We're
It's
We're
on.
on.
It's
live.
on.
I'm
We're
just
we're
like,
on live.
I
And
I'm
know
we're
like
it's
already
everybody's
going
getting a
ahead and
peek. It's
starting.
like the pre-show for the Daily Show when you just
I would
answer
really
people's
like
questions.
I think that maybe we should go ahead since he's
I don't
he's
know,
going to be
man.
a
I'm
short thing.
feeling like I should be like answering questions.
Well,
But
maybe let's talk about what you plan on doing and giving some
I'll say,
background. I guess
are we really going to have a podcast tonight? Yes, we are. So
we've already started it.
we've already started.
The
Hello,
interesting.
everyone.
Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
No, you're going to cut me off. Go ahead.
No,
You want
please
to do
go
the
ahead.
intro? Okay,
Please go
thank
ahead.
you. Hello, everyone, and welcome to AARPG Leftovers podcast. This is a podcast where we talk about all things TTRPG, basically related to that, and sometimes we branch out some other areas when it comes to gaming or topics that concern gaming, new anything, basically. I'm your host Sean with our co-hosts tonight. Matt happens to be here for Rando is on, and Malcolm, our illustrious other member of our cast. Um, and also joining us will be Adam. Will be joining us, who happened to
Hey.
pop right on. Adam Fox happened to pop on. He is joining us tonight. He's with Dork. He has a podcast of his own called Dork Day Afternoon, and he's for the most part everything I've listened to they've done. He's the games master. So basically tonight, one of the reasons he's on as our host is we're discussing being a games master. The illustrious honor that is and the privilege it is to guide a group of people like
And
herding
curse.
cats in a direction. I myself have only tried successfully to run one game, and everybody on this podcast happened to be on it, and it turned into a very interesting time. However, my other three, Matt, Malcolm, and Adam, specifically have all run games, successful games. So with that, we're going to get into a little bit. Adam, do you have anything you want to say before we start?
No. I'm kind of excited to be able to not have to run the show, if you will, and get to sit back and
Yeah,
kind of play along and answer questions. So that's cool.
that's
I'm good with
cool.
that and contribute.
I just want to make a comment before we start that we are at when it comes to subscribers, we're at 983, which is a big deal for us. You know, but we're only a few. If you want to like, subscribe, hit the button. That's great. But I just want to notice everybody. I was looking. We have 410 videos posted on our page, which
Dang.
is insane. And it's a combination of interviews and everything else. I think 100 of them took place at a Gen Con with Matt and Nathan. In and
It
out.
does seem like we did a lot. It's like
just to say,
I think we have a total of 8 up now, and we still have
really.
2 or 3 more to go.
I thought I watched all of them. Apparently, I am nowhere near finishing watching all the
Nathan
Gen
keeps
Con.
posting more and more, and
I'll get around to those.
it's just amazing. So with that, so we're just going to get a little bit. Going to ask some questions about you, Adam, and like we're not going to put you technically grill you, but it's just sort of. I'd like you to sort of say. So you're here now, and you're on a podcast, and you're gaming. And by the way, I listened. Though I started on episode 3, I listened to your Cthulhu Grindhouse, like like Star Wars fashion, went in a different order. But very good. Your collaboration with Pink Fohawk. But I like you to sort of paint a picture of how, like, you started gaming and how you got into games mastering, and if you could just touch a little bit on that journey that led you to here, that would be interesting.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, when I first started playing Dungeons and Dragons back like in the '80s when I was a younger kid, some of my my mom's friend from school, her kids were about the same age as me, and we kind of started playing Dungeons and Dragons together. And then when I moved to a new state, I somehow ended up like making friends with those same kids, but in another state, and so playing Dungeons and Dragons, and started getting into Twilight 2000. Interestingly, it was like the next one we kind of like moved over to. Had like Star Frontiers was another one we kind of played around with a little
Yeah.
bit. Shadowrun played a lot of second edition, so I kind of have a kinship with the Big Fallout guys for that.
Yeah, I get it.
And I had a Robotech, like the Palladium Robotech game. Yeah, and
You're singing Malcolm's old song right there.
Yeah. Seems like
that was awesome. There was an Aliens role playing game in the '80s or in the '90s that we had that one too, and also like a board game one where you just acted out basically the scenes from the movie. It had like little paper cutout minis and was like had different. Anyway, that was less role playing and more just shooting aliens, I guess. But anyway, and then I kind of took a break from RPGs for a while there. I went in the military and then kind of moved around the country a little while, and a few years ago, it was probably 2015, a friend of mine at work was telling me he was about to start a Pathfinder game, right? And like a homebrew, like Pathfinder campaign. And he and I had been talking about, role-playing games for a while. And I was like, I haven't played in forever. Can I come along sometime? And was right back into it. So it's just like any good addiction, it's like as soon as you fall off the wagon, you're right back in.
Yeah, I can identify with that too.
Yeah. And so I played on that campaign for a while, and we kind of ran through this like 2-3 year campaign. And then that was about the point when Starfinder was coming out, I think was when that finished up. And I, for some reason, was like, man, I really want to play this game, but I couldn't find anybody to GM it. And then I was like, well, I guess I could GM it. And then that was it. That's how it started. I was like, I want to play this game, and if I can't find someone else to GM it, I'm gonna. So
that is a slippery
and
slope.
now you've become the forever GM. In the
GM,
group?
Yeah.
that is a danger. But
yeah.
You end up always running the game you really want to play.
Yeah, is that how like Malcolm and Matt, you guys sort of got into it? If you want to comment on that.
Yeah, I got into being a GM because I wanted to play this game. I wanted the game to play I wanted to play this Robotech game. I wanted to play this Traveler game. I wanted to play that Star Frontier game. I wanted to run that D&D game. I ended up, running it. I wanted the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. I needed to run it because, everyone wanted to play those games, but the only way I was going to be able to play is to do it. I was a little bit luckier, for a while there, with having some people who would take up the reins to run certain games. But then for a while, I was you just end up being the forever GM. We're like, oh yeah, I'll play if you're running, and it's like, oh god, we need to run this game, but no, I'll just have to friggin' okay, I'll run. And that's how it ended up. So,
yeah, I was a little bit late, I think, to GMing.
You were
when I met a lot of the folks. We had a lot of already fairly established GMs, right? So we had a friend of ours, Lee, who was running a big D&D game that we played in for a while. And then it was like a whole string of Malcolm games, right? Robotech, all this, right? It
he was eliminated, yeah.
Until later. And I honestly don't, I think it's very similar in that the first game I ever ran wasn't with this group. It was in the military, and it was because I'd found some people that liked D&D, but nobody. We'd had a guy that ran, and then he got sent to Leavenworth. So our GM went to Leavenworth for transporting drugs from Holland into Germany. So we lost our GM, and then so about a year or so goes on. And so I ended up running a homebrew D&D game in 3.5. And that was kind of the first thing I ever ran, like way. And it was not for years later that I ran my first real campaign. And that was the Rift's Phase World 3 Galaxies. Mm-hmm. And I was fresh
before then.
Well, I think that was the first one real campaign. Are you thinking that Beyond the Supernatural?
No, it was. I kept thinking it was a D&D game.
You did run a Beyond the Supernatural
with that paladin, but yeah. I ran to be on the Supernatural too, so yeah, we did a lot of that.
We're so
That was-
old we can't remember what we
Yeah,
did.
it was like
I
there was
don't-
a time, and there was a thing, and
Right,
we used to wear
I honestly-
onions in our belt.
yeah,
Not
I
the other
honestly
ones,
don't know.
but not the
that's- but that's how I
the
got
other ones
started.
because of the war. I mean, like, you
It
know,
was very similar. I got
It was
started
like a
because there was a need, right? There was a need. I wanted to play. There wasn't anybody there,
wanted the
you know, and so
attention, too.
you
You
end
wanted
up
to be
running, right? Which I'll be honest, it's funny. I enjoy playing infinitely better than running.
and I enjoy
I
running.
find that
I-
out with you
playing.
because you do a good job running.
I know,
Just to
but
throw
it's
that
less
comment.
it's
Not that
less work.
anybody
It's like I like what Adam said. I like to show up. I've got my character sheet.
I have my
Right.
knights, and here I am.
Yeah,
I got a beer. I'm just like, oh, what's
That's right.
happening, right?
what's going on,
Right,
buddy?
right. So,
I killed that orc.
so yeah, I definitely I do like to run, but if you ask me like any given what's more relaxing or more enjoyable, it's definitely just to show
it's-
up and roll dice. So
Relaxing is never a part of the GM thing. And as you say, if it's more relaxing, it will never be
Yeah.
GMing.
No.
I think that's interesting. And the comment about Adam you made about you went in the military and you took a break. And there's a point I was in my policing career where nobody saw me for like 5 years. Literally none of my friends. Occasionally I'd show up randomly, and
we didn't want to get arrested.
well, and I would have locked your ass up in a second, cracker. Anyway, but I ran into him again, and it was Malcolm. He's like, hey, why don't you come play? We were running a GURPS Gold Sparrow. I think it was Gold Sparrow. And
Yeah,
I
that
just
was me,
jumped right
yeah.
into it. It was like a nice old set of shoes you put back on. So I agree with you on that. You just never lose it once you get it. Now, you have a style, and I listened. You know, your Twilight 2000 campaign varied from ours. Obviously, it was a lot more realistic, and even listening to your recent live game that you did. But Matt's really one of the ones who's a big fan of yours, and he actually stole some of your stuff. So I'm going to let Matt take over some of the questioning for a few minutes.
Oh, okay.
You have
All
some
right. Well,
questions you wanted to ask. I'm going to let you
I
ask.
did.
Or I'll ask
It was sort of okay. So thinking about immersive storytelling, right? So we've all played real life with our friends sitting around a table, right? And we've all kind of made this leap into the world of audio, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. The whole leap into like podcasting, this
Yeah.
audio, right? And it's cool, but there are challenges or differences in storytelling that we've all had to make some adjustments. And when I started listening to the Dork Day Twilight 2000 story, there was a technique that you used. It was a simple phrase that I you hear it once, it doesn't register, but you hear it a few times and you're like, wait a minute, I should be, and so in the idea of like, how do you make, this is a technique I think that works if you're just sitting at a table, but it's definitely important when you're talking into a microphone and you're trying to talk to people that aren't there and they're not looking at you in the face, right? And that question, and probably not getting 100%, is what does that look like?
Right.
And so that's why I really wanted to bring you on and talk about when did you start doing that? Have you always done that?
Yeah, I think what I it's variants of that, but I think usually I end up saying like, tell me what that looks like. Yeah. Or something along those lines. And God, I wish that I could say that I thought about it and I realized how great of a question it was, but it wasn't. It was accidental and mostly because of podcasting, right? Because I would be doing something or just GMing in general. Like I'm doing something and they're like, okay, so what's everyone doing? And I'm trying to buy time to like set up something, right? And then they're like, I'm doing this. And it's like 3-word answers. And you're like, God, like, give me, and it's like, so tell me what it looks like. And then that would buy me some more time, to like set maps up or to read an encounter card or to like read a stat block. If it was like, because I think I started doing that when we were playing, we right before we started the podcast, we were doing an Iron Gods campaign for a little while. And it was just us, like over Discord. And it was, just a way to kind of like buy some time so everyone's not sitting there quietly listening to dead air. And then it would also kind of prevent conversations from heading into like a football game. What happened, a couple days ago, and because I didn't care. And I'm like, God, shut up, But eventually, yeah, it turned into like, oh, this is really cool. This is a great way to like put that, narrative ability into the player's hands and let them kind of, set the stage and set the world and tell me, maybe like if they're like, oh, he hides behind a car, I'm like, okay, cool, there's a car there, and like I don't have to decide every single little feature, and it becomes more collaborative that way. But yeah, accident, 100% it was an accident. But
that's a wonderful accident. That's my thing is like I'm sort of stuck in the tabletop GMing mode, and I still have that problem when I'm doing the podcast. Is that one, I have to give up on. I don't use a lot of the virtual tabletop sort of things. We just I thought I would, but theater of the mind seemed to work better. And usually I only had a few props on my tabletops when I was running a game, and just enough to convey it. And then now I have to try and figure out how to do that. And then I'm figuring out, well, I got to describe the whole scene, and then they got to remember what's in the scene. And then everybody's like, and I'm just like, yeah. And then like, wait, they got to tell them all the 5 senses. And it's like that idea of like, what do you see? How does that look? Is a really excellent way of pulling the players into the scene, letting them describe it, and getting some actual time for them to talk about, to get them to fill out, instead of you just yapping on, which is usually what I do.
Right. And it also gives them a moment to like give their character. You know what I mean? Like it gives them a moment to like give that character some life. And then we get to see the things that maybe I wouldn't describe the character that way, because I'm the GM and I'm thinking about the other, what birds are in the tree or something like that. And they're describing their character. And it's from like a podcasting standpoint, it's almost a way of like letting the actor kind of do their thing. And I don't tell them what facial expressions to make. They just, do that. And since it's a podcast, you can't really do that when it's audio only. Like you have to actually like say what that is, but yeah, it's worked out pretty well.
I think similarly to the, what does this look like, there's been a lot of times listening to your podcast where perhaps like what would simply be in a dry game is like, all right, I'm setting up camp. Okay, who's assisting me? Well, so-and-so's assisting me. You roll a dice, you succeed or not, you have ants. But in that, another question I've often heard you ask when you have 2 people doing something, you'll often say something like, well, what are you guys talking about? Or something. And it's funny now knowing that's really all of this great GMing advice comes from just stalling.
Well, I'm buffering.
But still, right. But still, that's another thing I've heard you use.
Putting it, actually, yeah.
That's interesting because on the one hand, it's almost like, oh, crap. The players are like, oh, shit, I got to wake up. I can't just roll the dice. But it has led to conversations which I think have deepened probably deepened audience connections. And like you said, it's for you, it's a good time, right? We just edit a lot.
We go off golf script a lot.
So yeah, is that something similar, or is that something else that you tend to do in your gaming, or?
Well, I mean, yet again, I think that developed kind of like once I realized, tell me what that looks like, that kind of turned into also like, well, so what are you guys talking about? And I mean, a little bit of it was by that point, like trying to, have them fill the scene out and give the characters some personality and have them not just be like, okay, I roll a die, I do this, because that's not the kind of podcast I wanted to listen to, and that's not the kind of story I wanted to hear. So I was like, well, we need to give this more life and make them more human, and then, so it was just opening it up and giving them more opportunity to do that, was to let them have space to breathe and converse.
So along those lines, the follow-up question I have is using that as a tool. So saying like, what does this look like? And I really love like, what are you talking about? They're going to say stuff, and it's going to give you some valuable information to develop your story. Do you use that to develop the story? Like they'll come up with something, and you say, "This is awesome. I'm going to tie this into this."
100%.
Oh,
100%. Yeah, they'll say something. I'm like, oh, that's interesting. Like especially if it's a new character and they're just meeting them, and Jeremy, because Jeremy's really good about making up some bullshit in the moment. And just kind of like rambling on, and all of a sudden he's dropping in stuff, and I'm like, that's not really canon, but okay, I can work with that, Like there's been some stuff that he's thrown in, and I had to be like, that's not exactly what happened, but I'm going to say that's your character's perspective on what happened. And that was like, the closest I was willing to concede that.
No,
But
that's pretty amazing, actually, and it's the subtle things I think
yeah.
that you do, and yeah, and Malcolm does, and Matt does as well. But yours, because we've been around each other for a while, so when we see some of the things you've done and some other people have done, it's pretty. In some sense, it's inspirational because it's so simple and it works so well, and you don't think it's that big a deal, but it develops so much comes out of it. That you could develop so much story out of it and so much character development because me and Matt were talking about this last week about developing of character because we're not just talking to each other, we're talking to an audience, we're trying to give them some have some fun with us, right? And we want them to get attached a little bit to the characters, right? So they sign up and see what stupidity Sean's character is going to do, or Matt is going to do, right? Matt, did you have anything else you wanted to add? I thought you had.
Well, I was going to say, we've definitely, it's so funny, like where I work, when I first got hired, they told me that plagiarism is the greatest form of flattery in my business, right? Which is kind of odd because normally it's not, right? But this is definitely a technique, I think, that we've watched other people do this, that I've started to incorporate in my style. And it's we have like the things you do. It's also, we do a lot now where it's like, you roll the dice, you kill the monster. That question of what does it look like when you kill him, right? Let them narrate this cool. And the thing is like, you talk about like GMing is a lot of stress. There's a lot of planning. There's a lot going on. I think surrendering some of that world building and some of that narrative to your players is kind of relaxing. Like it allows them to share and have to come up with some of the stuff. So follow on, because we mentioned it real quick, VTTs, right? So
it's along the line of the questions I'm going to ask. Good.
VTTs, good, bad. And the reason I want to bring it up is I'll tell you from my experience. So when I was running the first chapter of Sex, Drugs, and Saving Throws, it's like PowerPoint. Anyone who first starts with PowerPoint, they make a simple PowerPoint, and then they start making them more complicated. Eventually they become a pro and they make them simple, right? So I was really learning how to use Roll20, and I had made just this huge elaborate final battle with 50, 60 pawns, all this stuff.
It's great.
Well, trying to run it and be narrative and move 60 pawns. I didn't even realize that I was literally like, he's getting stabbed. Okay, he's getting stabbed. And they all started laughing at me because I was having this dispassionate, because I'm trying to do all this bookkeeping in the VTT.
It was awesome.
And I kind of lost the narrative. And so I guess my question to you is, when you're working with the VTT, the good,
let me
the
visualize
bad, the
this for
ugly,
you. Let
and
me
what you
visualize
have
this for you.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, I got to visualize. So you got we were using Roll20, right? Was it Roll20? Okay.
Yeah.
So we got our little character icons, and he has these 25 little icons, right? And then he had the villagers are getting killed. So literally, he's moving these little guys, and then there was lag on top of it,
Yeah.
So we would start talking. I swear to God, man, it's like an hour of content we did was pushed down into 15 minutes because of all the VVT action. So as visual, it was very amusing, but it just dragged and dragged. So I'm sorry, Matt, but I had to include that from my visual standpoint.
Thanks for bringing up more how bad that scene was.
Well, the thing is, I wasn't there, Matt, and I empathize. As a matter of fact, that was like 2 years ago when I was attempting to try and do some VTT. Because I played in a game during the pandemic with a GM who was really on top of that stuff. Literally, he could move it in time and everything. It was scary, phenomenal how good he was. And then when I tried to step and try and do it for my own game, like the Supers game, it was just that intimidated the crap out of me because it was always a secondary thing, the map and having the figures on there were just sort of a casual reference as opposed to a hardline way you had to do it. And then I want to visualize this for the people at home so they can see it. And it was, Matt had already been there. I hadn't even known that he'd been to hell and back. I would have just, and I ended up I couldn't do it. I just said, I can't even, I got overstressed and I was having a baby and everything was not going to happen with that. So,
yeah, Malcolm had a baby.
And even now, it's like literally even my table games, with my local group, it was one of those things where I did maps for them for a while, but once I got through that thing, it was all just like, oh, theater of mind, and we all just went
Mhm.
theater of mind. And it was fine.
Yes. Let me
And
ask that question. Let me go over to that. Um, so preferences here. I don't know if Adam you ever did VVT, but if you have, if your preferences, do you prefer this theater of the mind? And this, I'll ask all three of you, one after another. Adam, do you prefer theater of the mind or VVT?
It depends.
Okay.
It depends on the combat. Like that's kind of my answer to it. Sometimes I like theater of the mind. Sometimes I like using an actual tabletop.
Okay. Based on the combat and maybe the system too.
Well, one the system, because like games like Delta Green, for example, I love theater of the mind for something like that because it's not meant to be okay. I'm here. I have this much movement. I can move. It's not that kind of game. But also it being like horror, it has more of a like if the players can't see it, it makes it scarier type thing.
Gotcha.
So yeah, yeah.
Well, I think in a horror game, it also gives them to think what scares the heck out of them, right? So, what do you think, Matt? Comparison VVT versus
So
theater of the
I'm
mind?
I'm probably the same, pretty close to Adam. I would say that the VTT. I think that I like a VTT for certain game systems that would require it, right, or has more chunky combat rules. It's just that if you're going to do a VTT for like a podcast, there's like a whole other layer you have to be aware of, right? So it's like you don't want to go, and this is if you were all in the same room recording, right? You had the same thing. If you had a map, a physical map on a table with little figures, a lot the average player is going to go, I move here.
Here.
Yes, yes.
Right. And so that's just something you have to learn if you're going to use a map or either an actual map if you're recording in studio or a VTT, that there's like a whole just different way of how you have to describe. Now I'm assuming, so Adam, you guys, from what I've played, and we used a VTT for Twilight 2000. Twilight 2000 is probably the chunkiest freely game out there. So I'm assuming you guys play VTT for that.
Mostly. I'd say most of what we do is VTT. And early on, I think I was way more wargamey about the way we played out the combats. I've gotten a little bit looser on it. Sometimes, like, for one, the urban operations, I love just the, like, zone, like, the sectors instead of, like, this many hex. Like, once it becomes a little bit more free flow like that, I kind of like that. But yeah, we usually use maps. There have definitely been times we haven't when it was like, no, this is theater of the mind. We're not going to worry about it. We're just going to approximate it. But yeah.
Yeah, for me, it's always been sort of it's usually system and game, whatever the game genre and the system that has affected that. As far as theater of mind to the virtual tabletop, like I mean, and sometimes it's not even like like the more tactical it is, obviously, the more chunky and tactical. Flat out, if you're going to do something like BattleTech, it's so you need a map. It's very dependent on how far are we going and how much heat and where you're jumping to. You absolutely need that kind of stuff. Well, other games can literally waffle between that if you really need it or not. And like, for instance, we played Blade Runner. That wasn't a game that we needed maps for. We didn't need to be visually. The maps were there strictly for our reference to tell the GM where we're going to be moving in the environment or what we're going to see in the environment. They weren't used like I'm moving my figure around. Now and I know that they're planning on moving to a very tactical map version for Twilight. 2000 in this newest version, or at least the newest supplements for it. And I'm kind of excited about that. I think they're doing that's for Aliens. I'm sorry, not for Twilight, but it's for Aliens.
You're thinking Aliens, yeah.
For Aliens, they're going to do that. And for me, it's I think that's going to sort of push it into that sort of tactical movements that need to be sort of recorded or sort of played out. But like I said with the podcast, it's very difficult for me to see how to do that, because that was my biggest thing with, like, even though Savage Worlds as a system sort of pushes itself as being for miniatures, we have rarely ever used it for that. And when we did, it was kind of like secondary to what was going on. And I realized that at a tabletop, it was useful in some ways, but not true. I could have just had a map and just had people say, I'm going down this corridor, I'm opening that door kind of thing. It wasn't really necessarily to move their figures. And so we're probably not going to use it when I try it again if I do it in a podcast. I probably won't use a virtual tabletop. Now, there are things like Alchemy, which sort of do things like, it's sort of like almost like a vision board thing, which are useful. Like, this is what the suspect looks like. This is what the artifact, this is the building you're kind of in, which would work really well for a lot of games, I think, in a podcast, as far as sort of sharing some images with the audience as well as your players, but not necessarily needing it to run a tactical situation or an encounter at all, So, and that's what I think I might lean towards that if I eventually, choose to do something with it again.
As a player, the most recent use of that we had was when Tyr ran the Destroyer Worlds campaign with the Aliens campaign, and that really came in helpful to me when we were going into the Central Complex to go after with the children. Remember that? The Children of the Divine.
Children of the Divine, the Twin Divines.
Calling them children because people thought we were killing children when we were playing. But it's like,
that's the name of that cult.
Children. We gotta say we gotta kill the children. That's our call. We can't. We're saying we're killing.
Kill them kids.
They're the children killing kids.
Yes, that would have well. But yeah.
But I found it very useful there, and we do not. And I just want to put this up. We do not actually hate children.
Tyr does.
Says the guy in our first Aliens game.
Oh yes,
who kicked the kid out of the APC, physically kicked the child out of the APC.
Wait. I wasn't there, but it was an Aliens APC, and those are pretty much crap. You're probably saving the kid's life.
Yeah, we might have. But I found it. But then there's some other areas we used it where I agree with Malcolm, or even that one time when Matt, unfortunately, tried something. All kidding aside, he tried something and it just didn't work out. So I get it, Adam, and if everybody, I get it. That I think it depends on the system and what you're trying to accomplish. So anybody listening whose kids were dicks, that's to be fair, to be fair. I think if you're listening, you should, try it. If it doesn't work, go in another direction. So along that line, I'm going to make a comment, and this goes to put it to all three of you, but primarily Adam. Given the fact we do more stuff online now, for us, it's most people. I don't know if that's just with you. It's geographical because you're spread out. We're not like Mercer and crew where we can all sit in a room comfy and have soda and talk like old school. Give it the advantages and disadvantages of one, the medium you're using now versus in person. And I'd like to get your take on what do you think, just online versus sitting down and doing it.
Well, all right. So
and that when we with the podcast with people in the room filming.
Well, when we first started playing online, so my brother was in the Starfinder campaign I was running, but then he moved, right? He moved to North Carolina. And so I was like, crap, my brother's not there. So then when that game had to get put on hold because of the pandemic, I was kind of like, man, I'm really jonesing for playing something. And I was like, well, I'm going to run this Pathfinder Iron Gods campaign. And I was like, well, shit, if we're going to do that, I could just get Jeremy to play too. And so that kind of came from that. And it was like, I had no intention ever of playing online. I was like, that's stupid. You got to sit around a table and play with people, And when we first started playing, it was just all Discord audio, which is a really weird way to play, but it took a little while to get used to doing that. And it wasn't until we started doing the podcast that we started using the videos so we could see each other's faces, because I was like, no, we need the visual cues of what each other's doing, But and that was more so, I think, for the show in that sense. But I don't know. It's definitely a lot different. I really do like playing in person. I like that sense of community that happens that way. But I love being able to just play with whomever. You know what I mean? Like we had one of the guys that listens to our show, Steve Power, on for when we did a run of Dragon Bay, and it's like, and he's in Canada, and it was just nice to be able to have people on, just whatever. It's kind of the advantage of the technology. So I don't know. I it's going to sound like I keep giving really iffy middle of the road answers, but that's where I'm at. I like both. And I loved Gen Con because it was like Brian and I were sitting at a table together, and that was the first time he and I had ever played RPGs at the same table. It was kind of cool. But yeah, so I like both, actually.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah,
You can like both.
You
You don't have to
can
choose one or the other right now.
What do we call that?
By gaming?
this
I don't
stuff.
know.
By gaming.
Adam just signs off. I hate this online crap. Boom. He's going like, man, we just
out.
screwed up.
Yeah.
That's perfect. That's perfect.
Yeah.
That's the whole reason I have that too.
Duke got it. And
See you
Sean,
later.
I still do both consistently. And for me, the thing was, I was not a fan of virtual. During the pandemic, it was I was like, you guys were pulling my teeth to get me to play. And for a while, I wouldn't play at all. And then I had someone locally start one, and I was like, fine. I eventually gave in, but I figured if I could do that locally, then I could do it with you guys out there. And the thing is, what's so funny is like the last game that I ran before I moved away from the area was that Gold Sparrow game, and its whole design was like all my old friends that I haven't played with in years. I'm gonna get them together. We're gonna play a game. It's gonna happen like once a month, but it's gonna happen, and we're gonna do this, And I had a lot of fun seeing you guys there and playing that game and building that, building out that world and building those characters. And this seemed like to me, hopefully James does not quote me on this, that this was sort of like a way of retouching that whole entire thing of that sort of legacy game of bringing all my old friends back together to play a game. I could do that now through AARPG, and I will do that. Do I like the tabletop? Yeah, I love tabletop. I love having the immediate community and things that there, the cues that are set physically, the things that go around the table, the way we sort of do things. And like you said, we don't necessarily have to have a map for tactical things, but it's easier to just sort of toss out a picture and go, that's what the guy looks like, as opposed to when you pull the digital library and project it over there. Sometimes can be difficult. It's not particularly hard at times, but usually on the fly, it can work a lot better. You can do that. And so I always love the tabletop environment, but what the online gaming has done for me has given me something that I can't have that way. We are too far away, we're too distant and so forth. And we can get together and say, okay, we're going to meet on this night. We'll just do it. And we'll go to get together and something. And it was just like, that was the whole thing about that Gold Sparrow game and saying, we're going to do it every third Saturday. It's going to be from this time, so everybody can get there, play the game, go home and see your kids or go on a date or whatever you're going to do. But we're going to do it, and then if we need to, we had plenty of time to reschedule the next one just to make certain we all got together to play a game, and now I don't have to work nearly as hard to do that because you guys are like herding cats when it comes to setting up a schedule. So I'm like, this is awesome.
Matt, what do you got?
Yeah, I'm, so clearly I enjoy playing in person, right? But I have to also say that I've not played this consistently since I was ditching all of my classes in college to hang out with you guys, right? so I have to thank virtual gaming for that. We were on our 4th year of the podcast, but almost a year before that, we were playing a high-level D&D game. This is the most consistent gaming that I've, like I said, done since my first try at college. So college one, right? So yeah, I'm all in there, but I do cherish, like, every year we have our geek weekend where we all get together in person and we drink too much and eat too much and play too much, right?
And far too much for some people.
Well, yeah, that's a good thing about BTC. We can't smell Sean
yet.
Or you.
We install our smell-o-vision.
Okay?
Yeah.
It tastes as good going in as it does coming out. That's what I'm gonna say.
Right. So I gotta say I do, and the same Adam also is that during the pandemic, even before we did our thing, I started connecting sort of with folks in different like Discord groups and stuff like, right. And even video games we did through Discord with a buddy of mine, all playing 7 Days to Die. There's definitely a way to communicate. And I would probably say that with video, I still feel like when we record, we make a bunch of jokes. We can kind of see each other's faces. I think there's enough visual cue that it feels natural for me. Now I'm more introverted, so I'm all in, right? It's like, I'm in my safe space. If I don't like it, I can, right?
Okay. Now we're here to lie. Okay. Now I'm going to call you out. That's my job as the host.
What?
So, call a lie when I
don't
see
do
it.
it. Just let it.
Which
Just let
lie?
that- Just let
This is
the
going to become
secrets
Crossfire in a
be.
second.
No.
Okay.
No, this is introvert. Yeah.
As someone who's hung out with you in person, Matt, I didn't think you were that much of an introvert, but you know.
So
He's like
I
the worst
learned a new
introvert, you
term. I learned a new term within the last year that finally, it's like, you learn like a word and you're like, oh,
I could
it was
use it.
masking. I'd never heard masking before. And I was like,
Like
that's
latex?
because I've performed in school, like on stage and stuff
Whoa,
like that. And I used to
whoa.
always tell people that it's like, well, how do you go on there and you flip a switch, right? Or I used to work in retail sales and I really liked it. Well, how do you do it? Well, you flip on a switch. Now I get it,
Just
right? It's like,
taking this down a wrong.
it's
dark
not
road
my
with you right now.
natural state.
Got latex and chaps, assless chaps, and all sorts of things.
Are
No one
you
even
talking
said ass
about?
chaps.
This is all you descending, John.
masking.
This is nobody.
He said
Like
masking.
code switching. It's
Not masking tape.
Oh,
Now it's going even darker.
well,
I do have so
No one
Adam,
uses
clearly
masking tape for that.
I've stolen some stuff that you've done, right? But even though we create podcasts, we also listen to podcasts. Is there anybody out there, like you've collaborated with Pink Bohawk or some of these other, are there any other things that you've seen that you've kind of been like, hey, I like that, or I want to try to do that, or I mean, and or are you like, no, I'm the best, I got this.
No, not the best. No, I think the thing, I mean, it did. It came from listening to a lot of different podcasts, and that part of that was like we were talking about the I move here, or even the idea of like, come on, let's explain it, let's make it more narrative. Like that came from listening to a bunch of podcasts and kind of going, oh, I like it better when it's like this. I like it better when it's like that. When it's this kind of story, if it's a little bit darker and grittier, or like if it's like with humor thrown. And I don't know. I mean, it's I'm trying to think if there's anything specifically I've stolen, but I don't know if I want to go on the record saying that I have, just because I don't want it to come back and bite me in the
How about
ass.
inspiration?
just say
You were
emulated.
inspired.
Yeah.
Inspired.
Inspired by
Well,
it.
I mean, obviously, and I don't know if this is the case for everybody, but for me, like Glass Cannon Podcast, like they're amazing, and I've
That's a
loved.
name that comes up a lot. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, they're amazing, and specifically, my favorite thing they've ever done is the Run a Delta Green that they do. The Get in the Trunk is just amazing, and I like that kind of tone of game, so it worked well into our Twilight 2000, for example, and I think I learned kind of how to run a horror game in that sense from like listening to the way they did it and kind of like having watched a bunch of horror movies and being like, oh, okay, this is the way to transfer the horror storytelling into a RPG, and kind of, going along those lines, which then fed into the way I'd like to run Twilight 2000. Because Jeremy and I, early on, my brother and I both kind of discussed how the theme of that game should be. And we kind of came to the conclusion that it should be like existential horror, just minus, like eldritch horrors. But it should be like eldritch horrors are tanks and artillery that might come in at any time out of the blue and you don't know where they came from, So...
Irradiated bears.
Yeah, no,
Exactly.
I'll be honest.
Ants.
That game has always sort of held that position in my life. I think because I could be, because I haven't played it with you guys recently, but literally when it came out in the '80s, it was like that's one thing I think it's very funny that when I discussed it with my gaming group here, they're all millennials. They're just kind of like, I don't know, and I'm just like, well, yeah. I mean, for me, that was the reality of what our life. Like this could possibly just be how the world's going to turn out.
Yeah.
There it is,
Yeah,
And I had a friend of mine, she was from Germany. She's like, yeah, we just thought we were going to die every day. We just lived our lives, just trying to do what we could. And I was just like, yeah, you just sort of live. And I'm like, we live near DC, guys. It was just like, if it goes down, we're all going to be nuked. So it's all good. It's like, we're gone.
I grew up in the Midwest, so I was constantly waiting for Russians to just like paratroop in like
Red
behind
Dawn.
my school.
Yeah.
Constantly.
Yeah.
I was just like, right over there in the field. That's going to happen any day now.
I lived like about 4 miles from the border of DC and Maryland, and we're like, oh, fuck, I got nowhere to go.
Yeah,
we were on Andrews. We knew we were going to nuke guys. So it's like,
It was funny too. Like you think about the, you never know what was hyperbole or not, right? So I happened to spend some time up near the border, near the Fulda Gap, and all these places that are out there, and like they would talk. You go up and talk to them, and they're like, "Oh yeah, we plan to be able to hold our positions for about an hour." Right, and it's all falling back to the Rhine, right? Hold them at the Rhine River, and everybody else is just, you're going to be gone. Soviets are going to roll you over in the first couple hours. You're just a speed bump, right? And so, yeah, there's a lot of that psychology that's built into that game. And when they decided to come out with a new version, you know, I was like, holy crap, like this is tapping into like all of those old, you know, fears of, you know, duck and cover.
Yeah, I grew up with that. We all did to some extent.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Well, and that was one of the things my brother and I talked about too, was because I kind of had to talk him into playing Twilight 2000, because he was in the military too. He was in the Marines, and he got stationed in some, right, and I'm a corpsman. I'm allowed to say that.
You are.
But so we kind of had a lot of conversations ahead of time about like the tone we wanted, and he was very adamant about like he didn't want something goofy, he didn't want something silly, like humor every once in a while, but he wanted it to. He was like, no, this should be like gritty, you know, and so we definitely tried to like go into that. But there were a lot of conversations where we kind of talked about like Tolkien, for example, and how some of his experiences in World War I potentially like informed Lord of the Rings, and we kind of thought that was an interesting circle where it was like that turns into Lord of the Rings, which turns into Dungeons and Dragons, which turns into Twilight 2000, which turns into us doing this. It's like a, you know, little circular thing happening, and I was like, that's pretty cool. But
That is. I agree.
yeah, and I don't know. It's I also feel like there's a like when I was in, it was before 9/11. Well, I was in on 9/11 when 9/11 happened, but you know, when I was in and when I got out was a totally different time than when he was in, right? And we were doing training one time in Korea, and we were just patrolling in the countryside. I remember we went through this like just this village, and you know, it's peacetime, quote unquote, you know. But I remember looking around and there's just kids, and I suddenly had this moment of like, oh, this is what that was like. You know, there was just this like having watched Vietnam movies growing up and being like, one of these people could have a grenade. I mean, they didn't, you know what I mean? But just like having a wild imagination, I was like, you know, and it wasn't that kind of thing. You know what I mean? Like we was just training ops, but it was just, it sunk in of like that idea of like that constant dread of not knowing, you know, and just like being in that kind of situation. And, I don't know. It's a cool world to kind of play in, I guess.
It
in
is
that
very
sense.
interesting.
It is. I know. When I started playing, a lot of my mental sort of beyond what we grew up in the movies we watched. So I had spent a good part of 2000 in Bosnia.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And, you know, you roll through these towns that people used to live in, and everything's just, and that's to me, like those things I saw, that's how I kind of picture, that's the world, right? You know,
That is
it's
their
just,
world all the time.
you know, but it would have been in everybody's world, right?
Yep.
So, yeah, no, it's a great system. I know Freely delayed the release, I think, of the
they
Urban,
did.
right? Because world events, and they didn't want to
Yeah.
look like we're, you know, right? And so you know, there's, I guess it's a sobering reminder that you know, the world's still. Wow, we really went to a more serious.
Well,
Sorry.
yeah. I mean,
Well,
no,
sorry
no,
about
no,
that.
no,
Sorry.
Let me make a hard left here real quick.
Yeah.
Fart
sorry.
joke.
Give me 1
Sorry.
second.
I wanna-
Insert fart joke here.
Yeah.
Insert fart joke. So
Give me 1 second.
I would say this
Shut
about
up.
the
Sure.
Twilight game. Well, go ahead,
ahead,
Malcolm,
Malcolm.
real
No,
quick.
you were in the Twilight game. Go ahead, please.
So real quick, I want to end on this because I think it's interesting. So we started with Twilight. We did an Aliens game. We weren't supposed to release. That was our demo, but we released it anyway. But we started with Twilight. We were going to try and go for hardcore like your group did. We were going to go for this hardcore. I had this scene where I played this serious gunnery sergeant, like Marine gunnery sergeant Mason, and the whole 9 yards. And he was real introspective and all that jazz. And I had to shoot an American. I took a lot of time into it. And within 3 episodes, we went to like locusts on the freaking Hummer and weird stuff happening. And we just couldn't.
That's Nathan.
That we couldn't stay the course. So I'm going to applaud you guys on keeping that style, and because it's interesting to see how you can play a game any way you want, but playing it like I thought we were going to play it was like, which is really rough. Like after you get through a grind and you go, okay, make a health roll, see if you get dysentery or something. You said one game, I was like, holy moly, these
Many
guys just
games.
went through heck, and I'm just like, it just keeps the pressure on, which
Yeah,
is interesting.
That is, I mean, because what's so funny is like I was, you know, I'm currently just started working on a world building for a game where its tone is not going to be that dreadful. I mean, it's more along the lines of, you know, Band of Brothers,
Mhm.
you know, in the games like, you know, Medal of Honor or something like that. I don't know if those necessarily do not have that dread, but there is a sort of overall greater purpose for hope, that you are
Mhm.
fighting something for a hope, as opposed to what Twilight has, where you are surviving. You're
Mhm.
surviving as the world is crumbling, and there's no stopping this crumbling. You're just trying not to sink in the hole as fast as everybody else seems to be around you, or maybe pushing
Mhm.
Well,
someone else ahead of you just so you can stay a little higher.
well,
You know,
games reflect times, Malcolm.
and
Remember
so
that, and we're
I
in
know
those
the
two
games reflects
times.
times, and so I was like, this game that I'm, you know, working on, I think it's going to be it's kind of like also sort of a nostalgic look back, but it's also, the thing is, I purposely have to sort of build in thinking that there has to be this sort of, you know, undercode of this, you know, all this ugly stuff is going to happen, obviously, but it's for this greater purpose that will end up being good and end up hopefully with a better world.
Mhm.
And that is often hard to sort of, it's easier to do in fantasy games than it is to do in,
Mhm.
like, I may be doing it, it's just going to be a science fiction game. Its current current working name is like, you know, battle dress, you know, battle dress diaries.
I like Battle
uh,
Dress.
but you know, that's, it's in the, you know, it's in the works a long while, but it's like that, were you talking about how you sort of had the discussion about Twilight and how you were going to set the tone for it and it was going to be, and it's like, you know, I too will need to do that when I, you know, when I talk to my players as far as what we're going to do, because we did a world building using Microscope, and I wasn't very specific about the tone of the game, and we ended up with some very interesting stuff. And my funny
Mhm.
thing is now is like, I'm not going to just toss it away. I'm going to just try and incorporate as much as I can into it,
Mhm.
because this was a design idea of making a world that was going to be not solely made up by me, but would have their input, and therefore
Mhm.
they'd be invested in it. So we'll see how this
So,
goes. But
so we're talking about world building, right? And something I've always wondered, because it's a lot of work, right? You have some things that are literally built like, you know, the mothership game I was trying to run. This is it, 2 pages. That's the characters on the back, simple, gives you a lot of room to work with, and that's easy. But when you build a world, like you build everything in the background, how much does that take out of you? And does that make sometimes you feel like, does that overwhelm you maybe a little bit? Like you want to sort of take a step back and go, you know what? I'm rolling up a character and I'm going to get drunk and play. You know,
Well, I actually I have it. The so along the lines of the whole like tell me what that looks like and like letting the players kind of like guide those things sometimes. I feel like sometimes too much sense of an ownership on something can generate resentment. You know what I mean? Like at a table,
okay.
and sometimes if like, and I've had that experience as a GM where it was like, you know, here's this whole thing, this whole elaborate like world that I've created, and here's this, and now the players are just in there burning shit. You know, like they're just screwing it all up and making it terrible now.
Yeah.
You know, and it's
Yes.
like,
I'm
but if
guilty.
you but if I start from that idea of like, okay, here's my basic idea, and I let the players kind of add stuff to it, then they're not screwing it up, they're just adding to it, you know, instead of, you know, I don't know, burning the whole place down. And so that's kind of what I end up doing is I try not to world build too much. I try to either really micro or very so macro that the middle ground that they're going to play in, they have a lot of room to play in it.
Okay.
So.
I like that. I like that. And
that has been
Malcolm,
yeah, that's been an evolution for me, because I used to be like, it was Tolkien. Like they had
no,
languages,
it
this was
was.
this
It really
region, these
was
were
that.
cultures, and then I just like, they just run through and burn what they're going to burn. Like, I guess they will
Hmm.
never know that those people were actually a part of. Okay, that's done. But you know, I mean, for me, it was also, I think it was my at that time, you know, but even when I, you know, there was, it's that fear of, I need to have it all covered, so in case they go off somewhere in the sandbox, there's something there. Um, Over the recent years, like the last 10 years, there's been a change where, I mean, it's been sort of like, here's this great framework. I've done these things. I'll put these sort of special things there and let them sit there and see what happens, you know.
Hmm.
And even, you know, and even now it's been more like, I've got this, you know, like this one game which I'm gonna, actually I have an interview sometime this month about, where basically I, you know, I had just a basic framework and let the players fill in a lot of it, you know. And what happened is the tone of the game changed from one thing to another. It started off with like all these small town folks going off on an adventure in the wilderness to becoming, we're staying right here in this town and these nobles have screwed up market day and we're going to beat them down till they fix this. That's what the campaign became.
Right,
So
right.
it's just like, okay, you know. and so it was really awesome seeing that changeover. But it's like, yeah, allowing, having that space, so that framework, is probably more the more mentally healthy ways of doing things. And so now I tend to like harp on like the mechanics as far as making certain that the background stuff works, so they can just plop stuff on top of it and go. So they don't need to know how jump works. I do. For moving their ship from space to space, they don't need to know that. I do, so I can build up parameters for it, sort of, if I need
Players rarely know the mechanics. It's fine.
He really did.
Yeah, and that's a fair
It's like, can I do this? And I'm like, yeah.
Sure.
that is fair.
Roll this.
Sure, do that. It's fine. I'm setting this on fire. That's just the library. Fine. There's all the clues.
Alexandria's
somewhere
gone.
else.
So
Hey,
it's
Matt?
funny. You guys talk about, some of the experiences I've had with I don't know if it would be the same if I was running a game completely outside of the podcast, right? But what I have found inside of the podcast is I used to be very, write a lot of details also, right? A lot of details. I got burned on that a long time ago. I wrote an entire season and then the players went left. And I couldn't use any of it, right?
Yep.
So I have some, like I ran Death in Space last year. I basically designed it as a flow chart. That's all. It looks like you're looking at a business flow chart. They go here, they do this, here you roll these. So if you looked at it, it doesn't even look like a module or anything, but it's all the decision points, right? Everything else can be narrative. And then the Sex, Drugs, and Saving Throws, what I did for the second season was kind of a collapse and expand on what I would call GM control. So if I have a scenario for a fight, that's a constraint. I've built a map, I have creatures, I have an environment, I've got stuff. That's a very controlled scene. But then we'd get out of that fight and it would be like, okay, you're at the fairgrounds, right? And so that was new to me, just kind of this kind of like letting go, rolling with it. Yes. And which, Nathan will joke, you come to show up at my game and you can see the railroad tracks leading right into the house, right? So, but it worked because I actually think that the players and then the way they interacted with the NPCs created NPCs that were much more interesting than I ever meant them to be. And so that's something that I've hoped to use in the future, is that kind of like, when does it need to be tight, for gameplay? Because it is an actual play, right? And then when can I back off and kind of let the improv kind of take over, So yeah, that would be one thing I'm trying to get better at.
Yeah, well, that's a noble thing to get better at. So Darcy made something that we've actually talked about earlier. So always start with the idea someone else has a match, or something like that. So, which I think I said that right. Always start with the idea someone has a match. That's to start the fire, right?
Yeah, to burn it all down. Yeah.
Burn it all down. Which
Be
is
ready for that.
great.
Just
We
start
should
the
put that
idea.
we should put that in quotes somewhere.
That was kind of like the other thing is
Swear
like,
to God, that's
never
so deep.
expect any plan to survive
So-
after one touch from a player. Just
Yeah. So as a player who mainly was playing as you were, yes, burn it all at him. Everything burns. I've been the guy who lit the fire. I've also been the guy to try there was one game we played, was a Battlelords game, and I missed a game, and I came back, and the games master was Chris, the Lego head. He goes, "Yeah, Sean, you were gone last week, and they fucked it all up. They went here, did this, and this." And then I was like, because I was the one like, no, I was playing this weird character, but I kept everybody on,
You did
point,
kinda
and
keep-
then which
You
is
were
what I
playing
like to
Colonel
do.
Sanders, the sniper.
But he kept us on
I did
point.
say so.
Coming from a psychotic buddy, that is
I am not a good,
But he-
ladies and gentlemen, I am not a good voice actor, but I
But he
tried.
did
God,
keep
I
us on
tried.
point, and literally it was like, as soon as he left, like cats and squirrels on fire
I got-
everywhere.
But so back to my point before I go on, I sort of agree with that. I don't like super structured games. It pisses me off when I feel like I have to make certain choices. So you got to have that sort of flexibility, because sometimes we did it in one of Matt's games and he got pissed. There's something we didn't go investigate a planet because we just didn't see the value of it, and he was pissed. But I told him, I said, you have not given us, we all talked about it, I said, you hadn't given us a direction to go there, because we're going to lose all our resources. And I actually played in character, and I said, doesn't make sense to the character or the crew. And I acted as a leader. Matt says I got Sean characters. I have Sean characters. I had to get away from Sean characters because I'm always like the guy in charge, like the military guy and all this. I'm like, I have to stop this. But Matt to his credit, didn't force us there. Now it cost me later in the game not going to the planet. He made me pay for it.
It was
and
an
that's
eye?
fair. Yep. He was the one eye. He made me pay for it, but he gave me that opportunity. So we're getting almost out of time. So I want to give Adam the opportunity. Is there anything you want to ask or talk about in the last few minutes we're on?
Showcase anything you guys have coming up
Yes.
for Dork Day?
Yeah, we're about to start in a couple weeks. We're gonna have the character creation for our first like Patreon only show. It's gonna be another Twilight 2001 we're running. It's called Rogues of Return for two reasons. One, I thought it'd be fun to play in Sweden, and two, it'll be fun to play with Marines instead of Army. So and it was also I liked the idea of like when the small craft stuff was coming out, the Hostile Waters. I was like, well, that's a perfect place for it. This is great. So in my head, it's like it'll be like an Apocalypse Now type, scenario. This is kind of what I'm
they're
envisioning.
gonna have they're gonna be on a boat crew or
Yeah,
something like
yeah,
that.
yeah. That's the
First.
plan. Yeah. The plan is they're gonna have a part. They're gonna be part of Small Crafts Company, basically, from the Second Marine Division, and then yeah. I mean, honestly, I don't know where else it's going to go from there. That's about the only bit of a story I have planned right now. That's it. This is where it starts. I don't know where you're going to go. So that's going to probably get based off of them and the characters they're going to make. But yeah, so we have that coming up in 2 weeks, and I'm finishing up the edits on our Call of Cthulhu run we did with the Pink Fohawk guys, so that I can get those out there for everybody. And actually, interestingly, the whole tell me what that looks like question turned into a really crazy plot point coming up in our 2 Past Midnight show. So that's coming up real soon, like maybe Monday on our new next episode that's coming out.
Very cool.
But
Look at this, Brian. Yeah, we get tortured on the water now.
on the water, under the water, beside the water, wherever.
And you know what, Brian? I'm going to enjoy the torture you're put under. So I'm gonna get more dialed into this this podcast. You guys, but I want to say, Adam, I want to thank you for joining us. What you said is very insightful and
Thank
very and educational. And I'm glad we got to share our thoughts. With the other 2 GMs, I just sat there and asked questions, guys. I don't have anything to
Your time is coming.
My time is coming. Yes, like you talking about death, sweet death, the sweet.
No, I mean
embrace of
GMing, which is
Oh.
like the death of yourself. but still.
no more pain. But I want to thank you, Adam, and I want to recommend everybody, of course, listen to our podcast, the Advanced Age Role Playing Game. We are currently on Dragonbane, which we're going to have a few more episodes of, but we will be moving on to another system. That's the thing about us. Dork Day Afternoon, they have continued to have the 2 Past Midnight, the Twilight 2000 podcast. You're going to have some more episodes of the Cthulhu Grindhouse, or
Yeah. There's 4 more episodes.
Yeah.
3 more episodes. 3 more.
three
episodes.
more episodes. I've been listening to that. It is very enjoyable. So keep an eye on that. You do broadcast that live, right?
Yeah, we do. When we do it live, we do it live for the patrons, and then we like
Okay, so that's why I'm getting it.
whatever, it gets streamed afterwards. So
Okay, good. So, all right.
You've also got a 3-episode Walking Dead.
Yeah,
I listened to that because
Yeah.
I'm fascinated. We're looking forward to playing that in the future.
yeah, that's I've snagged some things from the rule system of that and started applying them in Twilight 2000 because I feel like there's some overlap that
Some crossover,
could happen. Yeah, and that's the beauty of the Year Zero engine, and I really want to play a lot more of those games because I love that system.
Yeah, they do.
But yeah, and I'm
Yeah,
excited about the new Alien one, so that's gonna be cool.
Well, I agree. A lot of the Free League games are great. I think we all share a common love for them, and I think that's great. So I'm going to close. I want to ask everybody if you liked our podcast, follow, and subscribe. We're on. We show up on YouTube, all the podcast platforms. I won't kill you with that, folks. But we do have a merch store. Matt likes to talk about it. We do have some cool merch, but you don't have to buy our merch to enjoy our video. We don't,
You'll
we're
enjoy it a
elevating-
lot more wearing our merch, though. I tell you.
Our goal is one day to get but you know what, guys? Mics and everything costs money. Eventually, we will evolve to Patreon. We are not that organized, Adam. But I want to thank once
Thanks.
again everybody, and I want to wish you all the best. Remember, folks, when you want to break from reality, come see us because we're unrealistic. And I want to wish you guys the best. And peace, love, and bubblegum. And good night.